Do you have questions?
I was saying hi to Denise, but I do have a question. I'm just a little bit confused about the states, like samadhi state versus just being happy. I guess just because I've been, a devotee of Yogananda and just, doing you had mentioned something about all the different levels and something about meditating and then doing the kriyas and then something else, and it just kind of made me think about the ultimate goal is happiness, right? So on my spiritual journey, I've seen people in samadhi, maybe not in person, but in samadhi. So is samadhi a state?
Does it have a beginning and an end? Then it's a state.
Okay. So sorry. So the ultimate goal is happiness. Just is just that constant.
A
happiness.
state first is something that has a beginning and an end, and also it refers to specific conditions of the body and or of the mind. Whereas happiness doesn't require any specific conditions of the body or of the mind, you see. It's different.
Okay. Thank you.
For instance, the body may be in pain and we can experience happiness with the body which is in pain. And the body may be fine and we may be miserable. So that establishes that happiness is not a state of the body or of the mind.
Could you tell us something about the mechanism or the driver that is responsible for prompting the mind to be so relentlessly busy and full?
Again, since we just observed that happiness is not related to a state of the mind or of the body, it implies that we can be happy and the mind can be busy. So busyness of the mind doesn't imply misery. But there is a form of busyness that does. And the form of agitation of the mind, or movement of the mind, if you prefer, that implies misery, is the one that comes from misery. Meaning, comes from the belief in or the sense of separation, of isolation. So, as a result, this belief triggers all kinds of desires and fears first. And desires and fears set the mind in motion in order to fulfill the desires or to avoid the fearful circumstances, the fearful event. So, as long as the belief that we are a separate consciousness prevails, this movement will keep its will remain in effect. If by some artificial means, smoking a big joint, doing pranayama for many hours, we stop the mind, this stopping will be a new state which will be temporary, after which the agitation will come back with a vengeance. You see? As long as the root cause of it has not been dealt with, there is no. And we can observe that we get caught in some kind of vicious circle in which we get kind of self-hypnotized by a thought, by a fear, and then the mind runs, and we find ourselves again at the same spot, like on a merry-go-round. Now, this becomes different when we have had a glimpse of truth, because then we can clearly see the connection between this agitation and our belief to be separate. And then at that moment, it's like you have the merry-go-round running around, and it's like you have switched off the electrical power of the motor. Then it may keep running out for a little bit out of inertia, but it's going to stop, unless you switch on the power again. So once there has been a glimpse of truth, there is a way out of the running in circle, of the vicious circle. Another aspect, so this kind of thinking, triggered by fear and desire, I call it often circular thinking. I call it involved thinking. And there is another form of thought that also relates to ignorance, which is a tool we use to avoid the silence. Because we freak out in the silence if we are not interested in truth. We freak out. And so what we do at that moment, we go into some type of agitation, the sole purpose of which is to avoid the silence. There are people, they always do this, they are always... That's also a way to avoid the silence, to make them, I exist, I'm here. Because if there is silence, I get asphyxiated. I remember one day I was in a meeting and my boss asked me a question, and I was just taking my time, trying to find the best answer. And then he got impatient, and he got angry, because and I knew it, because he couldn't stand the silence. So it's very easy to observe that. So that's another type of agitation. Sometimes people, they will then have a tune in there, and they will constantly replay, the same tune, just to avoid the silence. It's different from a tune. If you have played a tune, if a tune is catchy, if you have played it, then it will come to you. But that's a different issue.
I have the feeling inside here. No. It's red. Red is good or is not good?
No, red is not good.
Stop at red.
So don't touch the mic when it's passed on. Don't try to switch it on or off. It's on, so it will remain on apparently.
Okay. Since I'm here, I've got more and more the feeling that I'm not here at all, and neither you. You know, it's more about in between, and like if I'm just a speaker, like a musical speaker. You know, like things are coming out from here, but even with the exercise of breathing in and out, the more I do it, the more I feel like a reverse thing.
Yeah, yeah.
When it's in, actually, it's. And I just wanted to know if it's.
It's good.
Okay. Well, that's it.
These are the ins and outs of the macula.
Hey, one thing that don't resonate with me is the notion that everything happens for a reason. I think you said it yesterday. What do you mean by reason? And
Yeah. No. It's very. There is a difference between these two formulations. Everything happens for a reason, and nothing happens by chance. Would you agree? It's not exactly the same thing. So I'd rather use the formulation "nothing happens by chance."
so no randomness in. There's no randomness in manifestation.
Yes, you could formulate yes. There is no randomness. Because for a reason assumes that an ulterior motive, you know, an intention, a goal, somewhere to go. And the goal is really in the moment itself. The moment is the goal, in other words. And the moment is eternal. The content of the moment, in fact, reveals the moment, the eternal moment. But there is no goal to the content of the moment that would be an ulterior content. Are you following me?
You say the last part again?
There is no goal in the content of a moment that could be defined as the content of the moment further down the road. You know, for instance, usually, if, let's say, if I play a tennis match and the goal is to win, right? So the current content is the point I am playing. And the goal is to see myself at the end of the match shaking the hands with a big smile, right? So, so that the current content, the point I am playing, has a goal for me, which is the final moment at the end of the match, right? But so that's not the real goal of the moment. The real goal of the moment is the moment itself, the eternal moment. So the goal of the content of the moment is not a different content down the road, but it is the moment itself which is eternal.
Eternal meaning timeless, or
yes. Eternal doesn't mean perennial. Right? Perennial means that it extends infinitely over time, whereas eternal means, out of time.
Can I do a quick question about today's breathing exercise?
Are you German?
Sorry? No, not offended. But what's the point of it? Is it a transparency exercise, or?
The point is the relaxation of the diaphragm and of the intramuscular structure, intercostal muscles. Because we identify with the breath, to identify with the body, this identification is not purely, and it is also intellectual. We identify with our birth, with our past histories. That's conceptual identification. But there is another form of identification, which is identify with bodily sensations, a sense of me. And for a bodily sensation, for us to identify with the bodily sensations, this bodily sensation needs to have a quality of permanence. You see, because a sensation that would be one of a kind is not a good option to identify with, because it appears, disappear, whereas we need something. I don't appear or disappear, I'm always present. So we need something which is quasi-permanent. So the breathing process is like that, hopefully. So the quasi-permanent, so it is a good option to identify with. So we identify with the breath, and in this process we distort the breath a little bit. You see, we localize it. So we localize the sensation of breathing, which naturally should be completely expanded. So this localization of the breath is made possible by some subtle contractions that make us feel the breath here and not there, that distort the breathing process. And what we do with one of the goals, if you will, the pranayama on the physiological level, is to get rid of these contractions, and then there is no identification. So when there is no identification with the breath, the feeling is that the breathing is universal. So this type of breathing dissociate the diaphragm from the rest of the body. It's like, when you dissociate, if you do that, right? You dissociate the left hand from the right hand. In the breathing process, there are two movements. One is the diaphragm going up and down, and also there is the intercostal muscles, opening the chest and closing it. So, in this, and also there are other parts of the body that participate unknowingly. So here we try to break this chain, to isolate the movement of the diaphragm, and it is just the diaphragm that moves. That's why I remember I said, make sure that your face is not, that your jaws are not biting, that there is no contractions in the jaws, that your forehead is smooth, that you feel the space, your arms should be ornaments, etc. These are all of that. And that everything is still, meaning that the intercostal muscles are not playing, and that there is only this little octopus in the sea, the diaphragm, that go psh, psh, psh. So we isolate the diaphragm. And also, we work only at the exhale, only the exhale is active in this movement. And the exhale is a contraction. And then the inhale is very short, so that the lungs are almost always empty. And that also enables us to exhale completely and to get rid of some form of chronic fear in the body. Because when an animal, and we are animals, is afraid or is ready for aggression, both mechanisms are very similar, either because there is a predator or because there is a prey. We don't exhale completely because we don't want to run out of fuel. Nature wants us to keep always a reserve, so to speak. Whereas if we are an animal in a completely relaxed situation, is going to let go completely, you see, and relax everything with each exhale. So, because in this exercise we work most with the lungs from almost empty to completely empty, we get used to allow ourselves to exhale completely, to empty the lungs. You see, so it plays on these two, to completely let go during the exhale, but also to dissociate the diaphragm from the rest of the muscles. So in this way we become more conscious of the body. And the idea is, the general idea, one of the general ideas of Hatha Yoga is that if we become very aware of all the components of the body, subconscious contraction cannot linger there. They can maintain themselves only in the twilight. But if we are the part of the body of which we are fully aware, usually we don't identify with them. For instance, the hands. We have most of us have a very precise awareness of our hands because we are using them for microscopic tasks, right? Like such as writing or playing music or whatever. So in order to perform these tasks, we need to be acutely aware of our fingers. If you hurt your fingers, it hurts. You see? So we need to be acutely aware of our fingers. And as a result, we don't feel that we are our hands. Our hands are a part of our body which is transparent. You see, we don't identify. We identify with the forehead, with something behind the eyes, or something in the throat, something in the chest. But no, not with the hands. So the idea is, if we become fully aware of all of the body in the same way as we are aware of the hands, then it becomes very difficult to identify with the body. So that's another aspect to it, that in order to dissociate the movement of the diaphragm from the rest of the body, I have to become more acutely aware of this area of the body, as a result, making the identification with it more difficult. There are other yogic exercises in the same vein and dealing with the same area of the body. One is Uddiyana Bandha, which is it is in fact the opposite exercise. It's one in which the intercostal muscles are active and the diaphragm is left completely passive. So it's also, again, the same dissociation. We expand the chest and the diaphragm, then it is sucked up by this expansion, and the lower visceral part are also going up with the same movement, but it's mostly, in fact, about the diaphragm being, in this case, completely abandoned. Loosey-goosey type of diaphragm. And there is yet another exercise, Noli, in which the separation which is made is between the abdominal muscles and the diaphragm, in which we separate them. The diaphragm is kept up, and the abdominal muscles are pushed forward and contracted. So yes, there are all kinds of tools in this arsenal of yoga, but the general ideas are constant. Also, the Sanskrit word for this exercise, Kapalabhati, it means the cleansing of the head. And the reason is that the contractions that are associated with the identification, they don't involve one single muscle in the body. There are chains of muscles going from the head down to the core. And by breaking it here, it also makes us aware of contractions here. That's why I was giving the prescription to really relax the head, the jaws, etc., when we do this exercise. And then you can feel in the head that it has been cleansed, in a sense, that you feel this expansion. So that's...
Thank you.
Hi, Francis. You've said that reality is that which is self-evident. Could you elaborate on what self-evident means? For example, what's an example of something that's not self-evident?
Something which is not self-evident is something the reality of which is dependent upon something else than itself. Therefore, something which is self-evident is something the reality of which is its own reality.
So the nighttime dream, for example, is not self-evident.
It depends on what we call the dream. As a perception, the dream is self-evident, but as we have seen, all perceptions are in fact made of consciousness. So, yes, consciousness is self-evident at all times, including during the dream state. However, the tiger that appears in the dream is not self-evident because it requires the consciousness to be present, right? To make it evident. So as a result, it's not self-evident because without consciousness, you don't have the tiger. But without the tiger, you can have the consciousness. Remember, what I call self-evidence in this case is absolute self-evidence. And there are not too many things that are self-evident. Consciousness is self-evident. There is something, existence is self-evident, or being. That there is something rather than nothing. In other words, if we use the Sanskrit terminology, sat and chit are self-evident. And the third thing, which is self-evident, it's happiness. Right? Because when you're happy, you don't need any proof that you're happy. You are following me? It's self-evident. So this triad, if you will, of beingness, consciousness, happiness, there are the three aspects of that which is self-evident.
And do you use the word being as synonymous with existence? Or is existence that which exists and fades away within time?
Yes. Usually, if we speak a dualist language, we have a pair of opposites, which is existence versus non-existence. And for everything phenomena, they come into existence and they go out of existence. So when they are in existence, we say they exist. When they are out of existence, we say they don't exist. But if we use the expression they come into existence and they go out of existence, then the word existence is used with a different meaning. Because existence, if you will, pre-exist the incoming object and perdures after the exit of the object. So then existence, that would be existence with a capital E. And this existence, which always exists, That is what I call being. So being is existence that always exists. Spinoza, that's the definition of substance by Spinoza. Substance meaning that which is under, right? The word substance is the Latin word for understand, right? That which stands under, the substance. So this definition of the substance is that which cannot not exist. That which exists, but in addition, cannot not exist. That the essence of which implies its existence. Therefore, it cannot not exist, because it essentially exists. That which essentially exists is substance or reality or being. Then all these words are synonyms. If you take the word reality, it's the translation in English from the Latin is thingness. Thingness, because res means thing, and reality, the thingness. That's the thingness. In other words, the thingness of a thing is not the thing. The thingness of a thing is that which gives existence to the thing. It is that which is the substance of the thing, right? So the reality of an object is not the object.
And so ultimately, will every claim of duality or every assertion of separation fall short because that which is perceiving object A and object B, if you trace it back, is always the same consciousness or the same awareness?
I don't know, because there could be three objects, A, B, and C, or O. Let's say O, the observer, and observing A and B, and there could be three objects, a priori, right? The fact that O is able to observe A and B doesn't imply non-duality. Non-duality, our intuition of non-duality comes from this deep intuition that everything we can possibly relate to is not separate from us.
Pardon? Is not?
Anything we can possibly relate to is not separate from us. That this separation is purely conceptual, but it's not factual. So therefore, either something, we cannot relate to it in any fashion or form, and will never, and therefore it is as good as non-existent. You see, it's some kind of unicorn. Or, if we can relate to it, it's part of us, we are part of it.
And so, would you agree that any claim of non-duality, if someone says, this is separate from that, the very act of making that claim is an expression of the unity of being, because that they're basically saying, I'm aware of object A and I'm aware of object B, and the I that is aware of object A is the same I that is aware of object B.
I don't see what you are driving at with I, A, and B.
Okay. I guess I was just trying to connect to it experientially, just sort of noticing that one of the protests my mind will come up with is, well, you know, this body is sitting over here and that body is sitting over there. And I sort of realized this morning that, you know, no matter what content you insert into the two slots of any duality, you're still the consciousness that's aware of this body here and that body there. It's always the same consciousness.
But it is the same consciousness which is aware of this body here and of this body there, but it could be that if we talk about sentient bodies, that which is aware through body A and that which is aware through body B are not the same. You see?
I see, yeah.
That doesn't address this objection. So these objections can only be addressed by going to reality, to the reality aspect, and the reality aspect, asking, okay, if there are A and B, and if A and B, for instance, perceive each other, interact, they must share a common reality that encompasses both. Now, if consciousness is the reality that perceives, and if we are convinced that there is only one reality, then there is only one consciousness. So we can either we say, what I define as consciousness is not the reality that perceives. It's something else. But then it flies in the face of our experience that that perceiving is real, I'm not making it up, and that the real me is the one who really perceives. Right? Whatever that is, the real me is that which truly perceives. So if we put these two together, on the one hand, there is only one reality for all practical purposes. And number two, I am the reality that perceives. Then there is only me. It's just that I have to change the belief systems I have regarding what I am. Because I believe to be, from my culture, from education, etc., I believe to be one fragment, one body-mind, one personal history, whatever, one fragment of that which I perceive. Is therefore a fragment of the reality. So, but this notion of a real fragment of a reality, a fragment of a reality is not a reality unto itself. The moment it interacts with other fragments, it means there is a all-encompassing reality that is the locus of this interaction.
Thank you.
Francis, regarding the last question, just to clarify if I understand, when we say that there is reality to perception and that there is one reality, that implies that that I am the reality that perceives, the only reality that perceives, and that is because the reality that perceives is the instrument through which I reach the conclusion that there is one reality. So,
you have lost me here.
So in the inquiry, you guided us to see that there is a reality to my perception, that there is something rather than nothing, or there is awareness. And once it is seen that there is only one reality, I can connect these two.
Yeah. If I understand the real me to be that which really perceives in this moment, that which is really hearing these words, if I say that's the real me, therefore I am the reality that is perceiving these words, and if on the other hand I am convinced that there is only one reality, then I add 1 + 1 and I get 2. I get 1.
Yes, I was, yeah, it's clear now. I guess I was trying to say that trying to make sure that the real, when I say there is reality to perception and there is one reality, the word reality in both these claims is the same.
Yes. To understand that, for instance, in this moment we are having a conversation. And if we assume that your reality and my reality, in other words, the reality that is hearing in you, because you are convinced, absolutely convinced that you are hearing my words in this moment, that there is hearing that is real. The rest could be a dream, but perceiving, nevertheless, of the dream is real, right? So, and the same here. So then, for this interaction, this communication, for this communication to be real, there must be communication. In other words, we cannot be utterly separate. Now, if we are not utterly separate, absolutely separate, it means that this channeling, this communication, has to take place through something which is real, for the communication to be real, and which encompasses both of us. I mean, both realities that are apparently separate, but are really communicating with one another. For this communication to be real, you see, it requires an ultimate reality that encompasses reality 1 and reality 2, if you will. Let's call it reality R. That encompasses reality, but that also trumps reality 1 and reality 2, that transcends reality 1 and reality 2, and therefore, which is the real reality of reality 1 and reality 2, which is so that's our real reality, our common reality, that makes this interaction possible, is also the one that understands both sides of the interaction and perceives. So everything I say is not proof, because you cannot prove that which is self-evident. I simply point as a self-evidence that there is only one reality, and that's it. And then at some point you say, oh yes, that's true, otherwise nothing makes sense. Really, nothing makes sense. And then, because in fact, when we speak about consciousness or awareness, it's for practical purposes. It's in order to show the path. But essentially, what we are talking about here is there is only one fundamental understanding, not two Advaita, or only one reality. There is only one reality. That from that, everything flows, you see, from this understanding. If you don't have that, you have nothing. If you have that, you have everything. Of that which is said here. Because then defining my own reality, my real self, is there is only one reality. My real self is the self of all beings. You see, it flows seamlessly from that understanding. It's an approach which is purely through the power, if you will, of the intellect. You can reach this conviction. It's a little bit like you have I would say the approach of the mathematician and the approach of the physicist. The mathematician doesn't do any experiments. Through the power of his intellect, he reaches the level of the ideas, the level of certainties. Whereas the physicist is at a different level, and he reaches the certainties through experimentation. And here I offer both paths, if you will.
Thank you.
Going back to the yoga, so today during the yoga I had two sort of contrasting experiences. And the first was when we were doing the exercise where kind of we do this circular motion of collapsing the spine and then leaning forward and then arching back up, and repeating this circular motion. It felt very much that I was moving, especially, I guess as my head was moving, it felt that I was moving. And to be the space in which the body is moving, it seemed like I needed to kind of artificially create this.
Yeah, do that.
Like out-of-body experience where I'm looking at the body,
Do it.
But then later on when we were doing the Kapalabhati breathing, initially I could see I was identified where this octopus thing was, the breathing mechanism. But then, because we were doing it all in unison and you could hear the breathing of the room, and then it felt that I was the whole breathing unit. Like how you were saying yesterday that there's this school of fish that they come together to form the flower, and then the prey. So I felt that I was the flower that was doing the breathing as a unit, and even I could feel that I was the water in which the flower was breathing.
But there is hope.
Well, what was interesting was that it didn't require any effort, or there was nothing different in my experience of breathing. It was nothing weird or strange, but it didn't require this artificial, thing of, I don't know, pretending like I'm out of the body. So I guess I was wondering if there was a way, because then I later tried to have that experience with that same exercise that we did earlier with that and it didn't quite work. So
But you see, I've told you, or I've said many times already, that fake it until you make it. No, I didn't say that. That's not. I'm not claiming authorship on that one. But don't expect to be successful as you try. But the fact that you try will open doors, and then you will discover later on during your daily life, that something has changed. And that's the thing which is important. To unglue yourself from the body. That's why these exercises, they are almost better left alone. You know what happens in Temecula from 3 to 4:30 remains in Temecula from 3 to 4:30. Because it is not necessary to understand the why and the hows of it to benefit from it. You see, to get the results. It doesn't add anything on that level. It adds on a more general level of understanding, of course it does. But as far as the feeling and the perceiving are concerned, then it doesn't change anything whether you understand the hows and the whys. I mean, it's good to understand, but at some point, if you ask too many questions, you never do it. You know, even in San Francisco, I had lunch with a friend at the time. He was the director in San Francisco of the San Francisco branch of BNP Paribas, the bank, and we came from similar schools. And during lunch, he said, "You see, Francis, you and I, we never become billionaires in business because before we start a venture, we have, with our mind, explored everything that can possibly go wrong, and we never started." So it's the same with this yoga.
Just as you were describing everything that could go wrong. One, two, three. That was quick. I did a little a small mantra.
Thank you.
So you got my drift, right?
Thank you. I feel a bit inhibited now because you said...
You have a question about Kapalabhati?
No, not at all. No, That's not, I don't know. I never have these kind of questions. But you just said if you ask too many questions, you'll never get it. That's not, it's killing the satsang. I think Adrian had the question about everything happens for a reason, and you said there's a difference between everything happens for a reason and nothing happens by chance. And you were about to say that, but the difference is that nothing happens by chance. And then somehow you got stopped there, and I was still wondering, where is the difference?
No, I explain it. I explain it because what we mean when we say, I was not clear, and I apologize, but usually when we say we have a reason to do this, it means we have a goal in mind, right? We do this because we want this, right? And what is understood is that the goal is a new state of the affairs, that the state of the affair right now is A, and that the goal is to change it so that it turns into B. Both A and B are content of consciousness. Okay? So usually when we mean that there is a reason for that, there is a goal, the goal is in time, at a further down the road in time, a new situation, right? And whereas if we say nothing happens by chance, it doesn't imply that. It implies simply that there is no randomness, and that the goal of the current situation is not a new situation, a new content further down the road, but that the goal of the content points towards the consciousness that contains it, which is out of time. So instead of being an horizontal progression from A to B, it is from A to consciousness or from B to consciousness.
So can we say that, for one thing, the reason of every content is twofold? One, to point to consciousness always, so it's always the option to see that it's consciousness being present, manifesting in this form, and B, celebratory reason, just for the sake of it.
Yeah, but in fact, these two reasons are only one, as we discover later. We discover later that it was fun all the way. But you can see that. You can say that already when you are in love with truth. You go to satsang, or you open a book about it, or you think about it, or whatever you do about it. You derive happiness from it already. That's why you are a truth lover, because you love the truth, and you couldn't be a truth lover and loving the truth unless you would experience the happiness that comes with it.
True. I was thinking of a different experience. I asked you once about, let's say, what we would call a horrible experience. A horrible experience, like something like even being tortured. And your answer was
like French beer.
Well, I can take that. It mustn't be. I can't imagine it's that bad.
It's better that you don't know.
No, but your answer was that you asked me. You answered with a question to me. Can you be sure that this was not showing you something or taking you somewhere? Even that experience. You know, if I open a book about the truth, and I'm inclined to do it, I love it, you know, oh yeah, that's what I want to do, right? But if I have an experience of, oh, you know, worry comes up because I feel sick, or some, you know, these kinds of
You're in a plane.
yeah, okay, or that, or that. I have a harder time to see that it's very helpful to remind myself nothing happens by chance, or I think it is related to the quote of Robert Adams that you often quote, that everything is unfolding as it should, perfectly. It helps, but it seems that I can only understand it by going back to what you said before. There's only one reality, so the one reality is the only cause for everything. And since I'm that reality, I must be the cause, also for this event, being in the plane, enter. But I don't see that I enjoy it.
But it's not the event which you enjoy. It's your true nature. I've never said that the event is enjoyable.
But it seems that I am not able to enjoy my true nature in that moment.
Events are neither enjoyable nor non-enjoyable. But enjoyment is always and only the enjoyment of our true nature, whether we know it or not. That's the difference between the ignorant and the sage. Is that in wisdom, we know what we are enjoying in happiness, whereas in ignorance we attribute the happiness we're enjoying, fleetingly of course, to the object, to the situation. Which prevents the stability of the happiness. Because then the happiness becomes as impermanent as the object that allegedly brings it about. And even more impermanent than that, because after the desired object or event has been obtained, the happiness doesn't linger as long as the object. Think of a Gucci bag, of a Ferrari, of a relationship.
I seem to be stuck a little bit. I can follow you by, for example, receiving the desired object. I can attribute it to the object, thinking like, oh, I get the pleasure out of this. But it's clear to me, since not always the same object brings about this happiness, it's clear to me that it's the end of the search, the end of the longing, which lets me fall back into my true nature, and I experience that. Now, could you describe this process with something that I fear? Maybe I'm a little, you see, I'm like, I can see that the objects, in a way, are not bringing about the happiness, but why do I fail to see that
You have to see the nature of fear.
Yeah.
And fear is related to the belief that consciousness is impermanent. So, as long as you have not uprooted this belief that consciousness is impermanent, there will be fear. To the extent that you uproot it, fear will disappear. So to uproot it, you first, as I often say, you first evaluate what is the evidence that it is impermanent. And at least you reach a state in which you discover that there is no evidence that consciousness is impermanent. But then, if you want to take even a more direct path, would you agree that consciousness is an experience?
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
Consciousness is an experience. Okay. So, the impermanence of consciousness, or the cessation of consciousness, since consciousness is an experience, the cessation of consciousness should be an experience.
Should also be an experience.
Yeah, yeah. But then, who would be the experiencer of this experience?
Yeah, no one. But it's okay. I answer you.
I'm just trying to corner the belief in the impermanence of consciousness, because if consciousness is an experience, we envision its cessation, and we are afraid of its cessation. But then its cessation, if you are afraid of something, we are afraid of an experience.
I know it's logically.
Well, then I give you the example of the bank account, right? No, for the rookies here.
Okay.
For the rookies, let me give the example of the bank account. You have written checks without having the money in the bank, and then your bank manager asks you to come to the bank, and he tells you, you see here, you have made a withdrawal of 1,050. Here you have written this check and that. And so if we make the addition, at the end you are in the red for $2,500. And you tell the bank manager, yeah, I understand, logically you're right.
It's
okay, go ahead.
Couldn't it be that consciousness stops? No one is experiencing that stop. Like non-existence or nothing. I know it could only be maybe just a projection, but this is something that my mind offers. Like, couldn't it be like
there are two types of nothingness. There is a nothingness which is the absence of objects, which is not absolute nothingness, because there is consciousness. And then there is absolute nothingness, which is, if you go deeply into it, an impossibility, because there is already something rather than nothing. As Parmenides used to say, being is, and non-being is not. So it's just non-being, absolute non-being is an impossibility, because there is something already rather than nothing. But all of that you have to tie it to the reality of consciousness, that consciousness is real. You are interested in the reality of consciousness. Now, ask yourself the question, is it not true that consciousness is its own reality?
Yes.
Or is there a need for another reality to evidence consciousness? You know, that's the thing. It ties to what we're saying about self-evidence.
Yeah. No.
You see? So the ways to what you understand here, it's very exotic, it's very outlandish, you know, and so it goes against all kinds of things we believe to be true. And so we have to use our mind, our intelligence to revisit our assumptions. And I cannot convince you. You have to see it for yourself. What I can is give you pointers, you know, and then you find out for yourself. And there is a moment when you say, okay, now I finished my investigation and
Yeah,
case is closed.
Yeah.
Up until that moment.
You know, it's a little bit. I wonder. I'm surprised myself because there are times when I think, "Oh, case is closed." You know, I'm even so. And then it's coming back because I tie it to the fact that there's again fear, and not only when the cat is in the back of the, you know, but also this existential fear of disappearance, which should no longer be there, if everything is clear. What you said. And I think it's clear. So
you have to give slack to the body. It's normal for the body to be afraid. If it is placed in unusual circumstances, or if there is a clear and present danger, in these two types of circumstances, clear and present danger, or unusual circumstances, the body is going to be cautious. And there are mechanisms that are going to get triggered, and these are fear mechanisms. And these are normal, okay? But that is different from the deep, constant, underlying fear of absolute disappearance, like the sense of impending doom that is always in the background. And then when this sense of impending doom has been lifted, the background is pure light, and then you can have the body is allowed to have its fears, but it's all relative. It's very different.
Does this also count for, let's say, health concerns? Because I see it's a difference when the body is put in a situation which is stressful, like maybe in a plane, or might being attacked. Or if the mind starts to worry, oh, this could be this could be that, because
I just the thing I was concerned. The thing had a breakdown. I said, okay, how am I going to finish the satsang? People online cannot hear. What about tomorrow? I have to go to Amazon. I'm not going to receive it tomorrow. I mean, all these type of things. But these are normal. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but
they are not existential. They are normal concerns, I mean, we always have concerns, but they are just the way we deal with the events in the universe.
I'm sorry, but if my mobile falls and it costs me $200, I'm not too big concerned. But if I, let's say, find like a health issue, I mean, of course, then it becomes clear, okay, this body is sooner or later bound to fall, which is kind of clear, and it's obvious and has to. I just don't want that concern. Is it to ask too much that this concern about the body might having an illness should go away? Is it normal?
No, if you have a medical problem, you do your best to take care of it. You have a surgery, you have a diet, I don't know, you take drugs, you know, there are not too many options: surgery, drugs, and lifestyle. Huh?
Yeah, okay, maybe it's
a knife or the chemicals.
What? The knife or the chemicals? Yes. Well, for example, for my father, nothing worked. I mean, he was older, but I could have the same disease, you know, and my mind is going on about, and nothing could help him. I know, because they were helpless.
At the end, nothing helps. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. The question is the end here? That's the question. Like, yeah. Wow.
Just the end of a bubble in the ocean.
Yeah. Oh, and champagne. We take that. Thank you. Which way should I go? First here.
Francis, can you address the relationship between consciousness and sentience and just life itself?
Yeah, yes. That's a good question, because often, for instance, so let me first give the definition. Consciousness is the reality which is hearing these words right now. So when you hear that, you say, yes, I am hearing these words, it's for real, and I am the reality hearing these words, and that's consciousness. Okay. Now, that this consciousness belongs to this body is not obvious. You see, this consciousness exists on its own. It knows itself directly. Doesn't need a body, doesn't need anything. So a priori, this experience that defines consciousness doesn't imply a physical object. Now, sentience is something else. For instance, we are talking to one another, and you are talking to this physical body here, right? And as you ask a question, this physical body seems to understand your question and then replies. And you say, okay, this physical body is sentient. This table, if I ask the table, what's your name? No answer. So for the time being, I call it insentient, right? Pending further revelation, right? Now, if you take the dog, I would say it's sentient, because when I call the dog or when I get up to there, it follows me. So the dog is sentient. A flower or a plant, in between, perhaps yes, perhaps no. I guess they are to a certain sense. So, in other words, sentience is a quality that we attribute to physical objects, right? And with a margin of uncertainty. They may be, they may not be, but it's we human beings that qualify objects as sentient or insentient. So it's very different, right? Because one is an inner experience which has an absolute certainty, whereas a sentience, we don't know. Let's say, for instance, and often, instead of using the word sentience, people use the word consciousness, which leads to confusion. For instance, at the emergency room, this guy arrives, and he's completely out of it, And the nurse says at the triage, what's your name? Answer, hey, Joe, can you see my finger? Nothing, no, nothing. So then she says, subject unconscious. Of course, it's a wrong use of the word. He's insentient. Because later on, the guy wakes up, and says, oh wow, I had this dream while I was comatose, I was there, I went to this place, there was all the family there, all the departed one. They were very happy, dressed in white, and so unconscious didn't apply because obviously he was conscious, right? According to my definition. So it shows that there is a distinction to be made between the two. That's something I used not to understand, but Ramana Maharshi says that there are two people, one is asleep dreaming, and the other one next to him see him dreaming, and he says, okay, he's here with me in the room, but he's unconscious. But in fact, the guy is very conscious, and he's somewhere else in his dreams.
Thank you.
Was there somebody up there? Hey, Francis. So in past satsangs, we've mostly operated level of the physical. You talked about at the beginning, you talked about physics versus mathematics. And today you talked about mathematics, and I didn't follow the proof. In my mind, there were some gaps in there, and I wanted to go over that with you. Like, I could see a lack of evidence of consciousness being localized. I don't see a proof of consciousness being universal. It seems more like an experimental sequence I go through. So I was hoping to hear more on that.
Well, that's not the point I was making.
Oh, good.
And the point I was making is that there is only one reality.
Okay, that much I got.
Oh, if you've got that, you have got everything.
Well, I have stories about my place in that reality. That's where the suffering comes in.
But when you say my place, do you mean the place of your reality in that reality?
No. Place of this consciousness in reality.
Yeah, but if there is only one reality, either this consciousness is that reality, or this consciousness is not real.
Can it be a subset in reality? A part of reality?
Yeah, but a part of the reality is not real. It depends on the whole. It doesn't have autonomy. Because it interacts with other parts. So if it interacts with other parts, it is dependent upon other parts.
So consciousness doesn't interact with other parts. It's independent of that.
Now, what I'm saying is that our reality, our absolute, our ultimate reality, has to be the reality, the one reality. Right? If there is only one reality, and you say, I agree with that, it means that our ultimate reality is that reality. It means that our real I is that reality.
I don't follow that.
It means that the reality of that which we are is that reality.
Can you say that slightly differently? I think I'm starting to get a nibble.
Yeah. I can see that. It means that the reality, if there is only one reality, it means that the reality of that which we are is that reality.
So there's only reality, and I am that.
Yeah. Whatever I believe to be is not the reality of what I am, because since there is only one reality, the reality of what I am has to be this one reality. So whatever I believe to be, which is limited in any fashion or form, in which its reality has to be this one reality.
Yeah, the part I struggle with is somehow that what I hear you saying is that I can't be a subset of the reality. Even like I get there's one reality. That I am not a subset, I am this one reality.
It implies that, but the way an easier way to go to this understanding is to take anything I believe to be and to see that the reality of this anything I believe to be has to be this one reality.
You say that? I didn't hear all of that.
Take anything I believe to be,
Okay.
assuming that is true. Let's say I believe to be the body, right? Then it follows that the reality of that which I believe to be has to be this one reality. If there is only one reality. So applying that to the body, if there is only one reality, if I believe to be the body is not a reality unto itself, right? The reality of the body is this one reality.
Oh, see, my mind interprets as the body is within, is a part of this one reality. And you're saying the reality of the body is the one reality.
Yeah. Whatever the reality of the body is. If there is only one reality, it's because your problem is you have an atomistic view of reality. In other words, you see reality as an aggregate of individual, independent realities.
I don't know about independent, but a whole bunch of individual things.
Yes,
working together.
Working together. But the moment they are not independent, it means they are all connected. So then it means there are no separate realities. That's the problem. It is this interconnection. If two items are interconnected, A and B, there cannot be a reality unto their.
Right. Okay. And I'm not saying my body is a separate reality.
Yes. Anyway, if there is only one reality,
We'll start there.
the reality of whatever you believe to be, for instance, the body, has to be that reality.
Oh, the reality of it. Okay. Not what I believe the body is, but there is a reality to that body.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just applying that to a case in point where I believe to be the body. So I investigate, yes. If there is only one reality, then the reality of the body has to be this reality. So if I feel that I am the body is me, it means the reality of me is that reality. But what does the reality of me mean? It just means me. The reality of me is the same thing as the real me. You see, there is no difference between the reality of me and the real me. Mm-hmm. If there is only one reality. Let me give you an example to illustrate that. The distinction between the reality of me and the real me, if there is such a thing. Okay? Let's assume, okay, I believe to be the body, right? And I assume that the body thinks, the body creates the thoughts, right? Now, if there is only one reality, and if I ask the question, what is it that really creates the thoughts?
Yeah, my
you know, the fine print is really, is in the adverb really. What is it?
My answer has been for years the universe.
Yeah, that's a reality, or whatever. Yes, but that's a reality that creates the thoughts. You see, if I believe that the body is that which perceives, right? And if I ask the question, but if there is only one reality, what is it that really perceives?
Reality.
Yeah.
So I think the part I'm stuck on is what you called the atomized thinking. Is I have these images in my mind, structural images in my mind
of reality, exactly,
of what I perceive my part in it, and those need to be investigated.
Yes, and okay. that's very interesting because this view. What is very interesting because this in Western philosophy, this view of the world is called atomistic realism. In Western philosophy, what is called realism opposes idealism, and realism means that the universe out there exists independently from mind. Okay? but that's the way it is, right? And I'm not against that at all. Mm-hmm. But then, atomistic realism is a description of the reality as being an aggregate of sub-realities. You see, like these views that what we see is made of very small building blocks called atoms that you cannot divide. Right? They are the ultimate increment of element of construction. Right? You cannot go smaller than that, and of course, this view of the world has completely been proven false by modern physics. There is a French famous quantum physicist, Bernard d'Espagna, who wrote a book. I mean, it's technical, of course, quantum theory, in fact, but in which he envisions the consequences on the philosophical systems of modern physics. Just as when Galileo came up with his scientific conclusions, they were belief system of the church that were infringed upon by the physical theory. And guess who won? At the end, Galileo won over the Pope, right? Right? And atomistic realism is one of those. It has been proven false by physics, by modern science, because this universe has to be envisioned globally, if you You cannot separate it into independent parts. Everything is interconnected. So that's a general idea. So we should, when we have the intuition that there is only one reality, we have this intuition of a global reality and of the deep interconnection of all the parts. That if two parts were truly independent, two realities were truly independent, it means that reality A could never interact with reality B and conversely. It means that for reality A, for instance, reality B will never be known, never have any influence, and be as good as non-existent. You see? So for all practical purposes, it is non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
Food for thought. You asked me to go in certain brainy direction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I went there.
Thank you.
I've been thinking about your question, and so I came up with a question about if two people get on a plane and one knows that they're consciousness and the other one thinks that they are, the body mind, and the plane goes down.
They both die.
They both die. So where's they both die, but the one that thinks that they're the body mind's probably going to be pretty upset.
But it doesn't last for too long, the upset, yes.
Well, once the body mind is gone, I'm trying to understand, I guess, the I personally wouldn't want to go through that experience.
I mean, who would? Who would?
I really did mean that sincerely, but but I mean, just in my experience, I'm feeling the background and the less of the grip of the body mind, and that knowing I'm consciousness, and and I'm feeling the happiness, and and it's all unfolding. But I don't know how how consciousness in me would feel about having to go through that experience. Like he was asking about getting tortured or something. I mean, I know. So my question is that no matter what, if you're really truly in consciousness and you've uprooted the whole body-mind identification, then it doesn't matter whether it's a good or bad experience, right? It's all that it's just a movie. It's just.
Is a question that you don't experience pain, physical pain? Of course you do. Is a question, do you try to avoid it? Of course you do. The question is, are you getting absolutely desperate? Of course you don't. It's like if you live on the surface of the ocean, there is agitation and you go up and down with each wave. But if you live in the totality of the ocean, there is a movement going up and down on the surface, but there is a stillness in the depth. So both are experienced. But it's a very different situation from having only the up and downs on the surface.
I've been riding the waves for a long time, but I understand what you're saying of experiencing both as you.
But also there is an ambiguity in your question, because it puts together two different aspects. One is physical pain, and the other one is imminent death, like the plane has. And these are two, because you can be in a situation of atrocious pain and still not life-threatening, or you could be painless and about to die, right? And know it. So, which one are you referring to? Because I've seen people who love the truth close to their death the day before, and not troubled at all.
Yeah.
On the contrary, kind of looking forward to it. But looking forward to pain, unless you are in love with black leather and
I just wanted, I mean, my question was just to make that distinction between, and you answered it, as far as just being in the body, mind, and identified with that, and how you would react compared to being in consciousness, given that scenario. And you answered it. So. Thank you.
Francis, during one of your guided meditations, you said, explore the body sensations and perceptions, but not feelings. You seem to make a distinction. And I wondered if you could explain that distinction.
I said feelings, not feelings. No. What I meant is that in fact there are no feelings in our experience. There are only bodily sensations. What we call feelings are a subcategory of bodily sensations.
So peacefulness, joy. You wouldn't describe those as feelings that go along with the body sensations?
That happiness, happiness or joy may be accompanied by bodily sensations and trigger bodily sensations. But happiness itself is non-phenomenal. In other words, by placing the body in a given configuration, you're not going to get happy. And you can be happy even if the body is in a very bad configuration.
So, in the depth of in the depth of reality, there seems to be an associated sort of being held in the arms of the divine is the only way I can really describe it.
Yes.
And I guess it's a non-feeling feeling. I'm not sure how to make sure that's or how to explain that as not a feeling. You know,
peace, inner peace, and happiness. You know, inner peace, happiness, and joy. I often quote a friend of mine, Yvonne. Peace is joy at rest. Joy is peace in motion. You see, and that is non-phenomenal. Because, in fact, the true nature of peace or of joy is nothing else than the experience of consciousness knowing itself, loving itself, contemplating itself, enjoying itself, understanding itself, experiencing itself, knowing itself. So all of that we describe by love, the experience of beauty, of understanding, of happiness.
But that's not a feeling?
Well, it's a feeling that is not felt in the body. For instance, a feeling of fear, you can have a thought of fear, and then you have a feeling of fear associated. And this feeling of fear is very much experienced in the body. If you can even see where it arises. So this type of feeling is made of bodily sensations. In the same way, if I have been worried that something may happen, that my things get broken, and all of a sudden it works again, then I'm happily surprised and my body relaxes and experiences elation. Small elation in this case. The elation experience is a set of bodily sensations of relief, of whatever, of relaxation, of after attention, and this set of bodily sensation is triggered by something which is not of the body, which is in this the fulfillment of a desire or the avoidance of a fearsome event. So there is a moment of fearlessness or of desirelessness in which our true nature shines for a fleeting moment, and then there is an impact on the body and of this relief. But before that, there is something which is not of the body.
And I think it's cautionary rather that any sort of bliss is an acquisition. That becomes kind of a search for a feeling, as opposed to what you're telling me is that the true nature is lawfully, non-phenomenally
what
happy.
is very important in what I said is this: the understanding of the true nature of happiness, or at least to be open to the possibility that the real nature of what we call happiness is simply consciousness knowing itself, enjoying it itself, beholding itself, loving itself, understanding itself, etc. So that, in other words, consciousness experiencing itself is the experience of happiness and of peace. Whereas often, as a truth seeker, we have a different imagination of what the experience of consciousness is like. You see, we don't necessarily project it to be the experience of happiness. We may have different. So by calling it the experience of peace, happiness, we get closer to you get the closest possible description of it.
Thank you.
Because often people describe it as something else than happiness. It's very weird. And you find that in Neo-Advaita teachings often, in which the goal is not happiness. The goal is some kind of enlightenment, after which you're still miserable but enlightened. So you can put a badge. I had the experience of enlightenment. I am miserable, but so this deep identity of happiness and enlightenment, if you will, has to be clearly understood. What time is it? Okay, we close the session. I have lots of questions online that I will then answer tomorrow. Sorry about that.